Hello YouTube! I'm Uncle Matt. This is my workbench. Hello YouTube, this is Uncle Matt. Today I'm going to be working on the Nagamaki. Just to start with, the Suba here has gotten a little rust on it from just being down here in the basement for a long time. And to take care of that, I'm just going to put that into some white vinegar and set it aside. The acidity of the white vinegar will eat the rust, but it's not quite powerful enough on its own to do any real damage to the steel. I'm just going to set that off to the side. And also the sword itself was sitting down here in kind of a bad spot, and my basement took on some water, so the tip got a little rusty, and I've cleaned that rust off, but you see there's some pitting. And I want to try to rub some of those pits out before I start polishing. And I could take it to the belt sander, but I'm afraid if I do that I'm going to take off too much and mess up the geometry of this tip. Or the Japanese term, the kisaki. So what I'm going to do is I have this, this is a double-sided sharpening stone. And I know this is not how some people would do it, but I really just have to make do with what I have, and this is what I have. And I'm just going to, I've got 4 surfaces here. This side, the back side, and then on the other side. Got the same thing here and here. So I'm just going to rub on one surface a little bit, then the next surface, the next surface, the next surface. I keep alternating the surfaces like that so that I can try and keep this line here nice and crisp. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth like that, one surface at a time, and keep checking it every little bit to make sure that I'm not going too far. And not going to bore you too much with this part. I'm going to go ahead and cut camera and come back when it's finished. Okay, so I've been at this for over an hour now, and the pits have become a lot shallower than what they were. Less noticeable, but they are still there. And the tip is starting to get really thin, so I think at this point I'm going to just flip the stone over to the finer side and kind of rub out the scratches from the coarse stone that I've put in there. I'm probably going to have to live with some of this pitting. I might be able to get some more of that out, but I don't want to risk losing too much of this tip. And yeah, this is a blade that I wasn't happy with to begin with in the first place, and so I never sold it. Never finished it. I didn't intend to sell it because it is a flawed blade in the sense that you see the edge isn't perfectly straight. It's a little snaky, whereas the spine actually is pretty straight. that happened in the quench. It actually, I expected to get a little bit of curvature in the quench, but I didn't. I got a slight recurve that through just some careful grinding I was able to make mostly straight. You can't even really notice it anymore. But as a result of that, the edge is not bent, it's warped. I tried to straighten it the best I could, but it was just, you know, it was a no-go. Also, right here by my thumb, you see there's a tiny little crack. I think that's a crack. I can't see it on the other side. It doesn't appear to go all the way through, but I think that that is a little crack that happened in the quench. That's what it looks like to me. So if I were ever to use this sword, or if I sold it and somebody else used it, it would probably break right there, and then this tip would go flying off and kill the neighbor's dog, or stick yourself in the eye or something with it. So, you know, a lot of people would have just tossed this in the bin. I can't bring myself to do that. Most people wouldn't even go as far as I have with it, but I've never been able to keep a sword that I made. I've sold every one I've ever made. This one I'm just going to keep for myself as a display piece, so I am going to go ahead and finish the polishing. Mostly because of the way I laid the clay out on this in a way that I never did before. It was an experiment. I still don't know how that hamon turned out, and I'm still really curious to see it. So I'm going to go ahead, polish it up, and I'm going to keep this one for myself just as a display. Not going to play with it. But yeah, let's go ahead and flip this stone over and get started on the finer side. Okay, from this point on, this becomes kind of dangerous. I'm going to be using this automotive sandpaper wrapped around the block of wood. This is a piece of really hard oak. It's nice and flat, smooth. And I'm going to have to basically, I'm going to polish all four surfaces, all four planes, one at a time, starting with 220 grit, and then moving on to 300, and then 400, and then 600, on to maybe up to 2000. I don't know if I'm going to go that far or not, depends on how it looks. But I got to get it up to at least near a mirror shine before I can etch it, and we'll be able to see the hamon. Yeah, while I'm doing this, this piece of wood here is there to protect the blade from the table from getting scratched, and hopefully protect my finger from getting cut on the edge while I do this. Okay, so here I have one side of the blade polished to 320 grit, but not all the way. It's just enough to where I can see where the problem areas are. So you can see I still have some horizontal scratches here and there, like there's a few little minor ones there. And they're not showing up so good on camera as much as I can see them with my eye, but there are still some horizontal scratches. So I need to keep going at 320. You can see the pitting there that I was trying to remove earlier. But the hamon is starting to show up, and it looks like it is actually pretty tame in some areas, but goes kind of wild in a couple spots, and that's actually what I was going for. I love a wild hamon. Just to show you the other side that has not been polished yet, so you can see how far it's come. It's the unpolished side, and this is the polished side. So I'm going to keep going at 320 until all of those horizontal scratches are off, and do the other side the same way. And then I'm going to move on to 400, then 600. And I also just want to say that, you know, if this is something that you're into, that you do already, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've not done this before and you're considering it, I just want to warn you that through this process that I'm doing right now, you will cut yourself. I've been to the emergency room 3 times getting stitches in different fingers, one of which I almost cut the tip of my finger off. During this polishing process, the blade gets very sharp, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's how these swords, the polishing, the sharpening, are basically the same thing. There's not a bladesmith out there who has not cut themselves during this process, at least not that I know of. If one of them were to tell me that he's never ever cut himself, I probably wouldn't believe him. So you've been warned. Not going to tell you not to do this. I mean, obviously I took it up and I started doing it, but I cut myself. Cut myself more than once. You will too, and it won't tickle. It's going to hurt. And you're probably, as a matter of fact, the first 3 blades I made no money on at all, because the doctor bill, the emergency room visit, cost more than what I paid for, what I sold the knives for. Okay, and I actually, you know what, to backtrack a little bit, the little wavy white line you see there, if you don't know what it is already, those of you who are watching this because maybe you search Nagamaki or Japanese sword, you know what a hamon is already. If you see that wavy white line that's showing up now that did not show up before, that is called a hamon. And it is a characteristic common in Japanese swords, not exclusive to Japanese swords, but it is common in Japanese swords. Most Japanese swords have that. It doesn't make the sword better, you know, it doesn't make it magical. It's just where the edge is hardened and the rest of the blade isn't hardened or isn't as hardened. The white line is just kind of shows you the transition between the two. I like it because it looks cool, not because I think that I can cut other swords in half with it. That's a bunch of bull crap. If you're one who believes in that nonsense, stop it. Read a book, get educated on it. Don't get your information from anime. But yeah, I'm going to keep going with 320. And then move on to 400.